This is your basic Blender tutorials session 2. In this tutorial, we're going to look at different modifiers that will help you when you're modeling your projects. To begin with, let's clear up our workspace. I'm going to press A on the keyboard to select all, and then delete to get rid of all the stuff we put on last time. Next, I'll add an object. Add mesh, and let's start with a sphere. If we zoom in on the sphere, we can see a couple of things. It's not exactly the smoothest sphere. It's really segmented. If we want to work with an object, we want to keep the polygon count low. So if I hit tab or go up here and switch from object mode to edit mode, hitting the tab key should also do that, but sometimes the hotkeys aren't set up on the laptops. So we're going to go into edit mode. You're going to see that the sphere is made up of little shapes, right? Little squares and triangles. Those are polygons. Each one of these little dots, each one of these little points is called a vertex. So the way that the computer calculates where these things are is it gives each vertex, just like you would on a graph in math, each one of those vertices is assigned a point in that three-dimensional space. So it has an X, a Y, and a Z location. And those vertices connect to make our edges. So if you go here, you can select vertices, and that'll allow you to select an individual vertex. You can also select an edge. An edge is the line that connects two different vertices. If you have edges that come together to enclose an area, that area then is a face. So you have vertices, which are the points, edges, which are the lines, and faces, which are the shapes. Typically speaking, we want to keep our faces with 3 to 4 edges. That helps with how the model looks. All right, in our editing menu mode, we've got some of the tools we're familiar with. So the move, the rotate, the scale. Mostly you're going to use your move, your rotate, your scale to extrude a region. So let's say I want this face to come out. I would hit E, then I would pull that out. And that would be to extrude it. Sometimes I also want to do, I want a smaller polygon within that. So I would then do an inset face. That allows me to have a shape on that same plane that then is inset, so that we could do something like eye is also inset. something like this, where we've got, you can also hit E on the keyboard to extrude. Undoing the inset allows us to do something like this as opposed to this over here. I'm going to go ahead and extrude this. Over here, there's the bevel, which is Control B on the keyboard for the keyboard shortcut. And bevel takes the edges and it kind of splits them in half. If I hit Control B, and while I have hit Control B before I scroll in and out, I can, oh, it's not letting me do it. There we go. I can scroll up before I click or down on the mouse to increase the number of bevels. The more bevels you put in there, the smoother it's going to look, but also the harder it will be to change and adjust that shape later. So when you're beginning, I recommend keeping your number of polygons low. You can do a loop cut, which will just, anywhere where there is a loop that goes around your object. So these are all quads, meaning they have four edges. 1, 2, 3, 4. If you have a row of quads that all line up, your loop cut will go all the way around those, like that. You also have a knife tool. Typically, when I use the knife tool, I like to go back into the vertice mode, because I like to cut to the vertices. You don't have to, but it helps keep your model cleaner if you do. So say I wanted to extrude a triangle. The knife tool can cut that shape up, and I can just extrude part of it. When you use the knife tool, you have to stop on an edge and start on an edge. Then you hit enter. And allows you to bring pieces out like that. Next tool that I typically use is the smooth tool. So let's say that I have let's say that part of my sphere is out of whack. This won't get it back to being perfect, but if I use the smooth tool, I can get it a lot closer to where that area then starts to fit in with its surroundings more. It kind of takes the average of those areas around it, kind of evens it out a little bit. And you can tell that that area is not perfect, but it's a lot closer than what it was. You can move individual vertices, just like we showed you how to move pieces in the last video. You can move lines or edges. Or you can move faces. There is a limit to how far you can undo something. So here you see I've hit my limit. So I'm going to tab out of edit mode to object mode. I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to add another sphere so we can start clean. Now, in the end, you don't want your sphere to be so segmented. You want it to be more smooth. That brings us to our modifier tab. And modifiers have a lot of different things that you can do with them. The most often we'll use things like the array modifier, which gives you exact copies of things in a row, or the subdivide modifier. So if you go to the wrench, the blue wrench, that's your modifier properties. So I've got my item selected. Click on the blue wrench. Go to subdivision surfaces under general. And you can see this is what it looked like originally. If I go over to here to levels and viewport, that's a little bit smoother. That's a little bit smoother. That's a little bit smoother. And probably more than 3 subdivisions. And you're going to be adding a lot of polygons. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this so I can show you something here. Now I've got my item selected. And I'm going to go over here to my modifier for that item. I'm going to click on this little down arrow. Looks kind of like a V. And I'm going to hit apply. Now, these two spheres appear to be the same. However, if I click into the wireframe view mode up here in the upper right, I've got different view modes. Wireframe shows me how complicated that mesh is. So here, if I were trying to do changes on the one on the left, I would have a very difficult time. Here, if I'm going to make some changes, let's say I wanted to go back here. Let's say that I wanted to have a part of this coming out. Let's say I just want this ring and I want to extrude it out. And then I want that ring. I want to extrude that out. Sometimes when you get into these middle bits, it's easier to extrude it just a little bit and then hit scale and then move it out. All right. That's fairly easy, right? To get the same shape with this object, you're going to have to select those rows and it's a lot more work. So there I've selected about the same amount. Oh, if you hit Alt and then click on an edge, it'll do the entire row in that edge loop. So an edge loop is where they share the same quad kind of orientation all the way around. I'm just hitting Shift and Alt to select multiple edge rows at the same time. All right. That was a little bit more work to get that done. But understand this is a fairly simple shape that we're working with. They also don't look similar. If I want to make this one on the right look more like the one on the left, if I come in here, I switch to edges by pressing 2, or coming up here and clicking edges there. I can then hit Alt and then Shift Alt on all the edges that I want to be sharper. And then I hit Shift E. So I hold Shift and press E, and then move my mouse out. Tab out of edit mode. And that makes that edge a sharp edge. So about the same result. The one on the right takes a lot less computer power, and it goes a lot quicker because you're editing and modifying bigger objects. So Alt to select the edge loop, and Shift plus Alt at the same time, plus left click, I guess. You have to hit left click to select those edge loops. You can also go up here to where it says edges, go down and hit edge, and then let's see, mark a seam. Let's see. This is another reason why the keyboard shortcuts are make sharp, clear sharp. I don't know. That don't work. Anyway, Shift and hold E, and then scroll in if you want to get rid of that. I guess it's called an edge crease. And here's your factor down here, so you can, on the lower left. So once you hit Shift E, you can click on it, but then you can also manipulate it down here so that you can get it exactly as sharp as you want it, or as creased as you'd like it. So that's your subdivision, and a little bit about extruding and making edges sharp. Okay. Next modifier I'm going to show you is the lattice modifier. I'm going to take this cube and I'm going to subdivide it a couple times. Now there are two different ways you can subdivide it. I'm going to go simple so that it stays in a basic cube shape. I'm going to go up to 3, and then I'm going to hit apply. I'm going to scale this on the z-axis to thin it out, scale it on the x-axis to narrow it down. All right, so I got something like that. Well, let's say that I don't want a brick shape, I want this to curve. One way to do that is to use a lattice modifier. So if I go over here, click on the blue wrench to get to my modifier tab, go to lattice, look out in my workspace, go to add, go down to lattice. We're going to scale my lattice so that it envelops or goes around my mesh. So scale Y, so SY to scale on the Y axis to make that long. And then I'm going to hit scale Z. It doesn't have to be exactly on the outside edge. I just think it helps to know what it is that you're going to be manipulating. Then you can go back to your object. In your modifiers tab, go into your lattice and then select the lattice. Okay. Now if we go and click on the lattice and we go down here, so there's my wrench, I go down here where it says object data properties. It looks like a little grid there. I can change the resolution of that. Like so. I would also, when you're first working, keep this fairly low. Okay. Now that I've got my lattice set up, I'm going to go to edit mode, which is the left tab, or you can just go up here and switch it up in the upper left. Now you see my lattice has little vertices on it. So if I want to start bending the shape, I'm going to select an angle that I want to bend it from. Go down to my move tool. If I drag my mouse over those vertices, it should select all of them. And then I can start to move that up. I can hit shift and hold shift and drag a box over multiple vertices. Let's say I want this to rotate. I can select those. I'm going to rotate that on the x-axis, so Rx, say minus 90. Oh, that'll be plus 90 over there. Rotate x plus 90. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. This side will be minus 90. Rotate x minus 90. Now I'm going to scale this on the y-axis to bring those in a little bit. Scale y. Shift select. Select those. I can bring them down some. Shift select. S for scale, Y for y-axis. You can move those out. And by manipulating this lattice around my object, which is fairly simple, I can start to really change the shape of my object in a controlled manner. So if I went and did this individually, that would have taken a lot more time because I would have had to move each of those sections individually. And I can actually go back and subdivide that a whole lot more. And now you can kind of get an idea of how the lattice deform would save you a lot of work. Because if I tried to do all of that to a mesh that's this complicated, it would have been really difficult. So that's the lattice deform. Now the nice thing about the lattice deform is that if I've got my object selected, right, I can hit tab or go into edit mode, and now I can edit the object as it is. So say I wanted to, say I wanted parts of this to come out. So I wanted it to extrude out. For whatever reason. Then when I come out of that, that automatically follows that curve around because the lattice deform modifier. And it does it in a nice, consistent way. Whereas if I had to do that by hand, it would be much more difficult to get that to look like that curve was exactly right. So that's the lattice modifier and subdivision modifier. Typically speaking, you'll make your model pretty rough to begin with, and then add a subdivision modifier on at the end and crease the edges to add some sharpness in places.